All right, let's get it started here on a Wednesday night. No time like the present, I presume, or I suppose. I gotta be honest, there's a concert in Pittsburgh tonight that I previously had marginal interest in. I was somewhat interested in, wouldn't mind going to it. And then they had some personnel changes, and it became really, really interesting to me, and I'm annoyed that couldn't make it to that one. But I couldn't skip the live Panther-Lair show, right? We do this every Wednesday. We get together every Wednesday. And I'm the one who decided to change the days from Tuesday to Wednesday. If I had never changed it from Tuesday to Wednesday, we wouldn't have any conflicts like this. But you know what? It's all right. I'm not going to skip the Panther-Lair show. This is what we do every Wednesday night. We get together. We talk about Pitt sports here on the Panther-Lair show. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com is the YouTube channel if you want to tune in for the live stream every Wednesday night at 8:30. Of course, we go live after every Pitt football game and do a post-game show. Typically when it's a home game, we end up starting a little bit later, usually a couple hours after the end of the game. This week with Pitt at Georgia Tech, we'll probably get it going, I would say, within a half hour after the end of the game. I'll tweet out an exact time as the game is coming to its close, so you will definitely not miss it. And you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Turn on your notifications and all those things, and hopefully you'll get those sent to your phone or whatever device so you'll know when we're going live. That's probably the best way to do it, and then you'll just get a little notification. Hey, Panther-Lair.com is about to start talking about that game, good or bad, so you probably should open the app. So you can, check that out. That's a good way to stay informed. And certainly, I think last week we had the post-game show after Pitt's win over New Hampshire. Not quite as lively as the post-game show after the loss to Western Michigan, but that tends to be the case. This week I think it's going to be interesting one way or the other. And, I'm jumping through the preliminaries that we often dwell on here on the Panther-Lair show when we open the show. I'm jumping through the preliminaries to just say that whatever happens this Saturday in Atlanta, 2 weeks from now in Blacksburg, and against Clemson and the rest, whatever happens, I really don't think it's going to be boring. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what these next 8 games are going to hold. I don't know what the next 2 months of football are going to bring. We saw what the first month was. Mostly up, one very big down. But these next 8 games, these next 2 months of football, I have no idea what to expect. I have thoughts about where this Pitt football team is. I have thoughts about where they're strong. I have thoughts about where they're weak. I have thoughts about which weaknesses can be improved. And I have thoughts about which strengths might be a little bit of a smokescreen or some smoke and mirrors that might be potential vulnerabilities. I have thoughts about all those things. I have thoughts about the teams that are on their schedule. And I have thoughts about the rest of the conference. And I have thoughts about who they should beat or who they might lose to or who they could beat or who they probably should lose to. All those things. I have thoughts about all those things, but I really don't know what's going to happen. And that makes it, if nothing else, interesting. So you take a game like this Saturday at Georgia Tech, right? Pitt has been pretty good against Georgia Tech under Pat Narduzzi. 4-1, I believe. 5-1, excuse me. They did play last year. It's hard to remember which teams they played last year and which ones they didn't. They did not play Virginia and Duke and North Carolina last year. They did play Georgia Tech, Miami, Syracuse, as far as their regular annual opponents, and Virginia Tech too. 5-1 against Georgia Tech. Their only loss to Georgia Tech was under Pat Narduzzi was 2017, which was pretty easily Narduzzi's worst team. Certainly his worst season at Pitt when they went 5-7 and then closed it out with that Miami game. By and large, he's done well against Georgia Tech. Now, the games have been close. The last 4, I think, have been one-score games. Actually, no, last year was a 2-touchdown game. But they've had a bunch of 3-point games with Georgia Tech, 5-point game, I think, in 2018, 3-point win in 2015, 3-point win in 2016. They've been close games. They've been interesting games. And even 2 years ago, 2019, they went down there and they won 20-10. Last year they went 34-20. Both of those games, though, rather late. Well, I mean, last year I don't know if you would say it was all that close rather late, but the 2019 game definitely had the potential to turn in Georgia Tech's favor. So Pat Narduzzi has more or less held serve on Georgia Tech, but it hasn't been a bunch of blowouts. It hasn't been necessarily commanding. You know what I mean? They needed Chris Blewett to win 2 of those games early on. Like I said, it was a 5-point game in 2018, 10-point game in 2019. It was closer than that. I think there was a fumble at the goal line, or it could have been even less than 10 points separating the two teams. And so these things, and Georgia Tech is interesting because they were Paul Johnson's triple option offense for so long, and you kind of had that established. And then in the last 2 years, they've had Jeff Collins, and things have sort of changed around. Or 3 years, I forget I think this is his 3rd year, I think. And they've had to install a whole new offense, and they've had to completely change things around and basically re-recruit the roster and all those things. And there have been challenges, but Georgia Tech looks like a program that's somewhat ascending. Now, they're fresh off a win over North Carolina, and that's going to draw a lot of attention and get a lot of positive vibes. They also, earlier this season, lost to Northern Illinois. Pitt lost to Western Michigan. So, I don't know if one cancels the other out in terms of a criticism, or, if I don't know if you're going to look at Pitt and say, yeah, but they lost to Western Michigan. You can pretty much counter that with, yeah, but Georgia Tech lost to Northern Illinois. So you've got these non-Power 5 conference losses. Georgia Tech's other, their loss came against Clemson, a 14-8 game. Not a lot going on there. I mean, pretty much that kind of sums up, I think, what Clemson's season has been. Not a lot of offensive production, but some really good defensive play. And then they take on North Carolina last week. Not shut down Sam Howell, but they sack him 8 times. They get 13 tackles for loss. And then they bring Jeff Sims off the bench at quarterback, and he accounts for like 4 touchdowns. And, I think you learn a little bit about North Carolina in that game because their defense is suspect and their offensive line is even more so. And maybe you get a sense of who Georgia Tech is when they've got Jeff Sims, who might be their best quarterback, out on the field. And so that looks like a program that is dangerous. It could do some damage in what is shaping up to be a wide open ACC this year. And this is a common talking point. I'm not the first person to bring this up. It's been talked about basically since NC State beat Clemson over the weekend. I think that firmly pushed the whole conference into chaos. Not upheaval or anything like that, but made it clear that this really could go a lot of different ways this season. And you have NC State beating Clemson. So Clemson's now got a conference loss. They're 2-2 and they're 1-1 in the ACC. You've got Georgia Tech beating North Carolina, and now the Tar Heels have 2 conference losses, right? Because they lost to Virginia Tech in the season opener, and now they've lost to Georgia Tech. Virginia's got a couple conference losses. Wake Forest is 4-0 overall and 2-0 in the ACC. Florida State is 0-4, and I think 0-2, or 0-1, one or the other. Everything is up in the air right now in this conference, and it really does feel like just about everybody other than Florida State can win this thing. Syracuse probably can't. They're 3-1. They haven't played a conference game yet. Kind of like Pitt, but it sort of feels like just about everybody in this league is going to have a shot. I mean, you could say that Carolina and Virginia, with 2 conference losses each, are pretty much out of it, and they probably are. But if ever there was a year when somebody could go 5-3 and get into, win their division, this might be the year. There might be that much parity in the conference right now, particularly with Clemson seeming to come back down to earth. Now, is Clemson going to stay at that level for the entirety of the season? I don't know. I'm still not going to bet against the talent level they have. But with the struggles they've had on offense, they lose their running back for a little while, and now they've lost their best overall player, their defensive tackle, for the whole season. This looks like the year where Clemson might be vulnerable. This looks like the year where Clemson might not continue its dominance. You realize for the last 4 years, Clemson has lost, I think, 1 ACC regular season game, and they've won 4 ACC championship games the last 4 years by an average margin of 34 points. They won like 2 ACC championships the years before that too, but I'm just talking about the last 4. It's just been, this has been dominant. I mean, they are just, they've run away with the conference, and it's been a foregone conclusion every year that Clemson was going to win it. That's why they got 125 out of like 140 some first place votes in the preseason poll. And who would vote against them? I wasn't going to vote against Clemson. Would you vote against Clemson? We all knew Clemson was going to win the championship. was going to win the conference and have a realistic shot at the college football playoffs again. It was a foregone conclusion. It was understood. Maybe not, though. Maybe this is that year where Clemson's talent hasn't quite caught up to the level they're usually at. And I mean, they've recruited great. They've put together great recruiting classes. They're not going to have some big fall off. But this might be, I think you have these sort of dynasty situations where every now and then you have a slip. You have a year where just the stars just kind of align. Your roster's not quite where it needs to be. You're kind of a year away at a couple key positions. You're not quite where you need to be, and you have a key injury or two, and then you get a fluky thing or this or that, and you end up with a couple of losses that you didn't expect you were going to have, and you don't end up winning the championship everybody expected you to win. This might be that year for Clemson. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm sitting here installing Pitt as the favorites to win the ACC. I'm not installing Pitt as the favorites to win the Coastal Division, because the reality is, as many people pointed out, everybody else in the league is looking at the same situation Pitt is. And there are a lot of other teams that could probably feel about as confident as Pitt probably does right now. There's one team in this conference. One team with many faces. And whatever happens, and I don't know. I mean, you could legitimately make a case to me right now for about 8, if not more teams as saying they're going to win their division and or the conference championship game. And I wouldn't really have a lot to argue with you about based on the results we've seen through 1 month of games. That's not necessarily a small sample size. Now, it's a unique sample size when you look at the first 4 games because a lot of teams have played FCS opponents, non-Power 5 opponents, even if they lose to them. So it's not entirely representative, but we do have an early sense. When you see all these teams that are 2-2, you look at the Coastal Division right now, there's only 3. First of all, nobody in the Coastal is undefeated right now. And only 3 out of the 7 teams have just 1 loss. The other 4 have already lost 2 games overall. Not necessarily conference games, although Carolina and Virginia are in that group. You look around and you can make a case for a lot of teams having success here. And that makes it interesting because they don't really know what's going to happen. And it kind of also puts a whole lot of pressure on just about every week. I mean, you're going to go to Georgia Tech this week. That's a huge game. You're going to go to Virginia Tech next week, or 2 weeks after that because they have the bye week. And that's a huge game, I just want to get the exact schedule. I know that Pitt has Clemson after Virginia Tech. Obviously, that's a huge game. Miami at home, huge game. Going to Duke, can't have a slip up there. And you know what? Duke, they beat Illinois and Northwestern? Is that what it is? Or no, Northwestern and Kansas. So I mean, not exactly top of the barrel Power 5 teams, but they've got 2 wins over non-conference Power 5 opponents. I think Pat Narduzzi has 2 wins over Power 5 non-conference opponents since 2015. Duke has 2 this year. Now, again, it's Northwestern and Kansas, but still, after Duke, you get North Carolina on a Thursday night. You think that's going to be a big game? If Carolina somehow gets its act together between now and then, and they're still sitting with only 2 conference wins at that point, there's going to be a whole lot riding on that game. Same thing a week later or 9 days later when they play against Virginia at home. And then you close out the season at Syracuse, which is a game where, I expect Syracuse, they're 3-1 now. I expect them to take a dive. But if Pitt can figure some of its issues out, that could be a very, very big game in the finale on the road at the Carrier Dome. If Pitt is really still playing for something at that point, it's going to be interesting. If nothing else, it's going to be interesting. And I think it starts this Saturday with this game at Georgia Tech. I think it's going to be really interesting to watch. And I don't know if I would point back to any seasons where I would say, boy, it was really boring that year. Can't really think of anything off the top of my head where I would say it was boring because you have 12 football games to sort of establish who you are, and there are always storylines that emerge. 2019 was kind of a boring season. To be honest, even when they lost, it's not like they lost in spectacular fashion. When they won, they had a few. I guess they beat Duke in kind of spectacular fashion. I guess the UCF game was exciting. On the whole, though, particularly the way the second half of the season went Wasn't very much exciting there. Last year was kind of a mess all around. There aren't often boring seasons, but this year I think it's going to be really interesting to watch how this plays out for who Pitt looks like and for what the rest of the division and the rest of the conference look like. Everything just got really interesting. I think really when Clemson and North Carolina lost, that made things really interesting because you took a step back and said, might be able to do something here. There might be a lot of teams that took a step back and said, might be able to do something here. Might be a little extra opening. I asked Kenny Pickett about that. I want to get to our comments and questions here in a second. I know a lot of chatters jumping in there. We appreciate that during the live stream. I asked Kenny Pickett about that on the Kenny Pickett Show, which you can watch on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m., we put out the Kenny Pickett Show on Panther-Lair.com, presented by Wellhive. And I asked Kenny about that of, you see something like Clemson losing. Does it give you sort of an extra jump in your step of, wait, this conference might be wide open? And, of course, he said, no, we always believed it was wide open. We always believed we'd have a chance and that kind of thing. And that's good. That's a great answer. I don't buy it. I don't buy it at all. I think they absolutely look at that and say, "Whoa, look who's already got a conference loss." I think they do look at that and say, "Whoa, look at North Carolina already having 2 ACC losses." Now you go down to Georgia Tech and you get crushed. None of those things matter. You know what I mean? You're going to be back to the drawing board trying to figure out how you can win football games again. But for right now, coming out of September, with the conference looking like it does, I don't know. It got really interesting. All right, let's jump into the chat. Of course, the fun thing we always do here on Wednesday nights and in the post-game shows, you can get in on the conversation and post your comments or questions. Let us know what you think and what's on your mind. Brock Madonic says, any insight on what happened with Bradley Mann? Yeah, Bradley Mann, a defensive end offensive tackle from Jacksonville. He'd been committed to Pitt since the summer. He announced his decommitment this week. I think it was a matter of there's always a lot of people around recruits. There's always a lot of people talking to recruits. And I think a lot of times people around recruits will try to convince recruits that they can, quote-unquote, do better or get, quote-unquote, bigger offers. And I think that might have been the case with Bradley Mann. I think Pitt is still involved with Bradley Mann. I think they'll keep recruiting him. It doesn't happen very often that a guy decommits and then ends up back at the school that he decommitted from. But I think they'll continue working on him, and I think he'll continue talking to them. I think he liked the Pitt staff. I think he felt good about the coaching staff at Pitt and liked what he saw out of the Panthers. But they're going to have to keep working on him. Is what it comes down to right now. Roman says, hey, Chris, don't think it was mentioned in your post-game show at all, but special teams this year is alarming. No return game at all on kicks or punts, and they can't make an extra point. Yeah, special teams is a problem. I mean, it's a flat-out problem. They've missed, 5 extra points, 4 extra points, something like that. They switch it up and put in Ben Sauls to do the extra points, and he misses 2 on Saturday against New Hampshire. I don't know what the solution is there. And even Sam Scarton, some of his extra points have looked close to missing. The field goals, they haven't, I don't think they've missed a field goal, but they also haven't been in sort of a pressure situation where a field goal was going to win the game. It's a problem. It's a big problem, and I agree with you. And you know what? Kirk Christodoulou has had a few punts that have not gone the way that he needed them to go. He's had a few punts that were basically shanked, particularly in times when he needed to not shank them. And I don't know what the answers are there. I think Christodoulou will settle himself down, but they got to figure out with Sauls and Scarton. They're 2 young guys who are kicking for the first time. In a game. They've been kicking for a long time, obviously, in their careers. But they're kicking in the game for the first time. And I don't know. I think it's just the kind of thing that's going to have to work itself out. I don't know if they have any other options. I don't think there's anybody else that they can go to. I mean, I'm sure they have other kickers on the roster, but I think Sauls and Scarton are probably their best ones. And I think Sauls, as a guy they brought in on scholarship, the expectation was there for him to be the man. And he hasn't. I mean, he didn't win the job, straight out. I think he handles the kickoffs, but he didn't win the place kicking job, at least not now, or not yet. And I don't know what the solution is there. And you worry as they start getting into these conference games. Again, I mean, games against Georgia Tech have been mostly close. Last year was a 34-20 game, I think. But otherwise, they've been close games. And games that have been won with field goals. Specifically, 2015 and 2016 were won on field goals. So you're going to have to figure out something there or it's going to cost you a game. As far as the return game, I got to be honest, I just don't see it being a factor anymore. I think you can still get plays made. And you can definitely, all right, so there's a couple things that go with it. The first thing on kick returns or punt returns, the very first thing you have to do is catch the ball and don't screw up. Don't fumble. Don't turn the ball over. Don't make a big mistake like that. All right. So that's the first thing they have to do. It's the first thing. You have to secure the ball. You can't have those mistakes. All right. So that's number one. And, Melky Stovall isn't getting it done on punt returns, and they got to put Jalen Barden back there. And if Barden's not going to make good decisions, you got to put MJ Devonshire back there. And if he's not going to do it, you got to put Vincent Davis back there or Jordan Addison to take fair catches all day. Just somebody who's going to catch the ball. That's number one. All right. Then when you look at actually getting plays out of it, there's just so few opportunities. There's just so few opportunities. Pat Narduzzi talked about how guys can get a 5-yard running start on the kickoff. That's for the half of the, that only matters on the half of the kickoffs that don't just go into the end zone for a touchback anyway. Narduzzi actually said this last Thursday. He was like, why don't we just put the ball at the 25 and just stop wasting time? And I think he's absolutely right. Like, why sit through a kickoff, watch the ball sail out of the end zone, touchback, or a guy signals for a fair catch on a kickoff and catches the one, touchback, he goes to the 25. Just put the ball at the 25 and start the drive. I mean, I can't remember the last time I saw a big, impactful kick return or punt return. Now, I'm jinxing myself. It's going to happen this weekend. I know that. That's how these kinds of things work. And I feel this way about football overall. Just stop. I mean, we've I don't know if it's through the rules or we're replacing the ball or giving them allowing for the fair catches or just making, years ago when they moved the touchback in college football from the 20 up to the 25. You might as well just take it out and just place the ball. Now, that doesn't have anything to do with Pitt's return game. I think they've got guys who could probably make plays. I think MJ Devonshire can make plays on returns, whether it's kick return or punt return. I think Jalen Barden can make plays on returns, whether it's kick return or punt return. I think Izzy Abanikanda can probably make plays, whether it's kick return or punt return. They've got guys who I think are good enough athletes who have enough speed to make plays in those situations. But just with the rules and, I feel like they've faced some pretty good punters so far this season. They just haven't had a lot of opportunities to return anything. So I'm totally with you on the kicks. They need to clear up the place kicking situation and figure out what the problem is there. But on the return game, just don't fumble it. You know what I mean? And try not to run backward on punts. Just either take a fair catch or catch it in kneel or run forward 1 yard. Don't run backward. Don't lose yards. That would be my only request. RJ Seaman 38 jumping in as a super chatter. We appreciate you as always. You can, if you want to be a super chatter, you can click that little $sign there, support the podcast, throw a couple bucks. We really appreciate that. It's, we do this for fun on Wednesday nights. Like I said, I'm sad about missing a concert, but we do this every Wednesday night. Don't want to miss out on it. It's fun. I think it's part of the routine. It's part of my week as I kind of plan out my week each week. It's Wednesday night, 8:30. Got the podcast. And so we appreciate it. If you want to be a super chatter and show a little love, we definitely appreciate that. And RJ Seaman 38, one of our regulars. So we appreciate you for sure, man. S-Max says, with a win against Georgia Tech, Pitt is back on track. I think the thing that got Pitt off track was the loss to Western Michigan, obviously. That was the big sort of going off the rails. Beating an FCS team last week, New Hampshire, it doesn't put you back on the rails. It doesn't get you back on track. It doesn't change the Western Michigan game. It doesn't erase the Western Michigan game. But I do think in terms of a response and in terms of just kind of being exactly what you need, that New Hampshire game fit pretty well. Now, best case scenario, you would have played a great ACC team the week after Western Michigan. You go out and beat them 56-14 or something like that. That would be the best case scenario, right? But that wasn't possible. Your schedule set up with New Hampshire after Western Michigan. You lose to Western Michigan. The best thing you can do is go out and show that loss is not going to hang with you. It's not going to stick with you. It's not going to slow you down. You're not going to dwell on it. You're going to go out and kick the crap out of New Hampshire. And that's exactly what they did. From the start to the finish, they beat the crap out of New Hampshire. 77 points, 707 yards. You only give up a touchdown. You basically give up one play. You get a safety. You get sacks. You're making plays all over the place. And I think, your schedule is what it is. So you had to play an FCS team the week after you lost to Western Michigan. The best thing you could do in that situation was go out and take out your frustrations on New Hampshire and give yourself something to feel good about to sort of close the non-conference. So you don't go into the ACC schedule with that loss hanging over your head. It's done. It's in the rearview, and in the time since you lost that game to Western Michigan, you beat another team by 70. FCS or not, you beat another team by 70. And it's no guarantee that you're going to beat FCS teams by 70. We all know that. We've seen Pitt lose to an FCS team. We've seen Pitt go to overtime against an FCS team. We've seen Pitt beat an FCS team by, 4 points or something like that. What was that game against Delaware in 2019? We saw Virginia Tech this past weekend beat Richmond like 21-10. It's not a foregone conclusion that you're going to beat another college football team by 70. However, it is a pretty good response to a loss if you go out and beat the next team by 70. And so, I'm not going to say like they're back on track. And to be honest, SMAC, I'm not even going to say at any point that they're really on track, because every week of these next 8 games, every one of these next 8 games is a challenge. And there's going to be pressure on every single one of them. This conference is wide open. This division is wide open. Nobody is the clear favorite anymore. But if you lose a game or two, you're going to take yourself out of the race to try and be that favorite real quick. And so, because the thing is, kind of like I said, Pitt's not the only school that's looking at this, or not the only team that's looking at this and saying, boy, this thing's wide open. We can go out and win here. Georgia Tech is looking at it that way too. And Georgia Tech is saying, well, we've got to beat Pitt. Georgia Tech already has one conference loss. They lost to Clemson. They don't want to get into that 2-loss category. And they want to separate themselves from Pitt. They want to put themselves ahead of Pitt, just like Pitt wants to put themselves ahead of Georgia Tech. And then the week after that, they're going to want to put themselves ahead of Virginia Tech. And then a couple games after that, ahead of Miami and ahead of Duke and Carolina and Virginia. All these coastal teams are trying to separate themselves. And so every one of these games, if they beat Georgia Tech, will they be back on track? I don't know. They'll be on track, off track, untracked, in track, whatever it is. But they'll be one game better than Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech will have 2 losses. So actually they'll be like 3 games better than Georgia Tech. And that's what you want to do. That's where you want to be. You want to create that separation for yourself. And that's what's going to be on the line every game rest of the way. Chris says, this Saturday, rather than the game in Blacksburg, could go further in determining the fate of the season. Virginia Tech looks highly unimpressive, whereas Georgia Tech, especially defensively, is better than we thought. We'll see about Georgia Tech's defense. So here's the thing about Georgia Tech's defense. There's been a lot of talk about them playing sort of a 3-3-5 defense. I was looking at some of the numbers on Pro Football Focus. They blitzed Sam Howell on about 30% of his dropbacks, and that only produced about 2 of their sacks. They had 6 sacks without blitzing, 8 sacks total in that game on Saturday. What that says to me, when they're not rushing more than 4 on 70% of their plays. What that says to me is they're dropping guys into coverage and trying to make it really difficult for the quarterback to find an open receiver. Now, I mean, I didn't watch that Georgia Tech Carolina game closely. I don't know if that's exactly what they're doing, but when I look at those numbers, that's sort of what I see, which makes me think they're probably going to do something similar this week. Now, I think they'll have more respect for Kenny Pickett and maybe try to blitz him a little bit more and pressure him. But the thing is, I think they'll be wary of getting caught in a blitz. That if they send 5 guys and Pitt picks it up for just a little bit, Pickett can find those open receivers because that's what he's been doing all season. So I think a lot of this game, again, they're going to be dropping into coverage. They're going to be trying to blanket everybody, keep Jordan Addison under wraps, keep Taysier Mack under wraps, keep Lucas Krull under wraps. Only rush 4, sometimes rush 3. And see if Kenny Pickett can see if those receivers can get open and see if Kenny Pickett can find it. Now, if that's what they do, right? If that's how they want to play, if they want to try and take away the pass, what do you have to be able to do? Have to be able to run. Georgia Tech is like 50th in the nation in rush defense. They're giving up, I just looked this up, 130. I have the number written down right here. 136.5 yards per game on the ground. They give up 165 to Northern Illinois, 161 to Kennesaw State. Clemson got 158. Last week, North Carolina had 63 rushing yards, but that kind of is, a total of yards gained minus 55 yards for sacks. So, you kind of balance that out. They've been okay against the run. But we know that the last time Pitt went to Atlanta, Vincent Davis went off for like 247. Now, I don't know if Vincent Davis will be the man again this week, but we'll see if Pitt's running game can do some of that work this week. That could be key. If they can get that running game going, if those guys can run, then I think it's going to force Georgia Tech to have to adjust to stop the run, and that should lead to Kenny Pickett having more opportunities. I'm going to be really interested to see how they try to defend Kenny Pickett. If they try to get after him or if they try to drop and say, you're not going to find anywhere to throw. In which case, that other thing Kenny Pickett can do, he can run. He can run. And that might be a weapon in this game if they keep dropping coverage. All right, we got super chatters here jumping up and jumping in. Michael B., one of our regular super chatters. We really appreciate you, man. Says, hi, Chris. Do you think this will be a high-scoring game? I could see a score of like 38-35 either way. Look, all I know is the over in Pitt games is like, I don't know, 10-2 over the last 12 games or 11-2 over the last 13, something like that. The over keeps hitting, and it's hit in every game this season. And until that's 4 games in a row this season. Until the over stops hitting, I'm going to keep expecting the over to hit. And part of the reason the over is hitting is Pitt is scoring a lot. You know what I mean? Pitt is doing its fair share to pick that up. Although, whatchamacallit, Western Michigan scoring 44 certainly helps the over hit. There were 85 points in that game. I'm going to expect some scoring. For a number of reasons. I mean, Pitt's offense has been really rolling so far this season. They've been scoring a lot through 4 games through September. And, Georgia Tech's offense, well, I should say more Pitt's defense, we don't know. We need to see them put together a really good game against Power 5 competition. We need to see them put together a really good game against FBS competition, which they haven't done. They did it against UMass, but not really against Tennessee, not really against Western Michigan. So, I mean, this defense has question marks as well. The offense has looked pretty good. Defense has question marks. That could lead to a lot of points. If those things kind of hold through this game at least. Let's see here. John Waffle H2P says, who did I see? I wanted to get to this. Oh, S Max says, I want Pitt to run it up and then watch the handshake. And Blackman614 comes in as a, super chatter. Sorry, I lost it because I'm cracking up at the comments. He comes in as a super chatter, Blackman614, and says, can dudes knock that MFer out? And he's talking about Jeff Collins. And Jeff Collins is an interesting guy. I mean, he's a character. Obviously there was that handshake at the end of the game last year where Jeff Collins kind of blew off Pat Narduzzi. I really don't think it was about Narduzzi. I don't think he was mad at Narduzzi. I mean, he just lost the game. Narduzzi didn't do anything. Narduzzi didn't really do anything egregious during the game. I mean, he was just being himself, but I don't think there was any reason for Jeff Collins to be mad at Narduzzi. I think Jeff Collins was mad at the officiating. And rightfully so. The officiating was horrid in that game. It was terrible officiating in that game. And Georgia Tech was not the beneficiary of the calls for the most part. Pitt benefited a lot. Georgia Tech got a few calls that went their way. But I feel like the bulk of the bad calls did seem to go Pitt's way. And I think that's why Jeff Collins was so upset after the game. Pat Narduzzi said they talked it out and hugged it out or whatever he said. And they, cleared everything up. But... I think, I don't think there's anything there, and it's funny because I always thought that Narduzzi and Justin Fuente had some animosity, but from what I've heard, there's not really much there either. These guys get caught up in the heat of the battle, they get caught up in the game and they might feel some kind of way, but I think for the most part, they're cordial with each other. I mean, how many times did Pat Narduzzi and James Franklin subtweet each other over the years, and they still stood at midfield before their games and chatted like it was no big deal. So, what do I don't think there's a lot to dig into there. RJ Seaman 38 says 3 years in a row at Georgia Tech. Yeah, that's some unfortunate scheduling, and I mean, this year was supposed to be in Atlanta. 2 years ago, 2019, that game was supposed to be down there. The one that really messed it all up is when the ACC redid the schedule for 2020 and changed everybody's schedules around. They gave Pitt an extra game at Clemson. They were supposed to play Clemson this year, as they are, but they got the bonus gift of a trip to Clemson last year. And then they, for whatever reason, switched Pitt's game with Georgia Tech, which was supposed to be at Heinz Field in 2020. They switched it to a road game. And so now Pitt ends up going to Atlanta 3 years in a row. Now, I would be a fan of this. I really like Atlanta. I think if you're looking at ACC road trips, Louisville is a great place to go. And I'm talking about the game, but also just being there. You're going to be there for a weekend. You're going to go on Friday. You're going to stay until Sunday. What are you going to do? How are you going to enjoy yourself? How are you going to spend your time? Louisville's a great place to go. And I think Atlanta is probably number one, though. And I mean, Miami's nice. I don't mind the triangle. Boston College is not in Boston, so you're not really going to Boston. But Atlanta, I think, is tops. And I've had a great time every time I've gone there. I've gone there for Pitt games. We've had rivals. Sometimes the rivals publishers will get together for a conference. It used to happen annually. And we would have those in Atlanta. I like it down there. Now, I didn't go last year, and I'm not going this year. Jim Hammett's going to cover the game for us down there this year. But Atlanta is tops for me. Now, I'm not a big fan. I'm not the team, and I'm sure the players and the coaches aren't excited about having 3 trips there in a row. That was another question for Kenny Pickett on the Kenny Pickett show was Pat Narduzzi's tweet last year about cold showers, and Kenny said, yeah, for some reason the showers there never seems to be any hot water in the showers at Georgia Tech in the visitors locker room. Said he hasn't run into that anywhere else, but Georgia Tech always seems to be cold showers. So I never had that problem in my hotel. I stayed in a bunch of different hotels in Atlanta, and I never had a problem with the showers in the hotels there. So I can't speak to that. Like I say, I really like that place. I have a lot of fun there. A few comments about this game. Chris J says, I have no idea what Georgia Tech is this year. It could be the jump forward year, or North Carolina is just bad. Brock Madonic follows up, says North Carolina just isn't that good, it seems. Their O-line is abysmal. Yeah, I mean, I think what you've seen out of North Carolina is they're not very good defensively, and they're not doing a great job of protecting Sam Howell. Now, they've got arguably the best quarterback. I was going to say arguably the best quarterback in the conference. No disrespect to Kenny Pickett, who leads the league in just about every category. I think he's trailing Brennan Armstrong from Virginia in yards. But I mean, touchdowns, passer rating. I mean, he is arguably the best quarterback in the conference. You know what I mean? You could take your pick of Pickett or Howell right now. Sam Hartman. I mean, there's some quarterbacks playing well in this league. We'll just say that. Sam Howell is really good. He's a really good thrower. He's a really good runner. And if he's smart, he'll get out of North Carolina after this season and not take another chance with a questionable offensive line. And I imagine he'll go into the draft next year and probably be a pretty high pick because he's a really talented player. But their O-line's not doing a great job protecting him, and their defense isn't doing a great job of, keeping the other team under 50 or 40. So Howell has to go out there and pretty much on his own because he doesn't have the running backs he had last year. He doesn't have the receivers he had last year. And he's got to go out pretty much on his own and try and lead his team to score 45 or 50 points every week. At least that's how it looks after 1 month. And so, I think it's a good win. I think it's a good win for Georgia Tech to beat North Carolina. But I agree that, I think you're still finding out who this team is, who the Georgia Tech team is. And we could say that about every team in the conference. We can look at how they've done through the first month. We can look at the results so far and the production and all that stuff. Everybody has some question marks. And, this next month is going to be interesting to watch. And then that final month and that final kind of push to clinch the division championships should be pretty wild. Let's scroll down here. RJC Man says the defense needs to do its job, not over pursue, but at the same time need to flush the quarterback out. Well, you don't want to flush him out of the pocket too much because Jeff Sims can run. I think he ran for 3 touchdowns in the win over North Carolina. You don't want to flush him too much. You want to actually keep him contained. The thing about Jeff Sims, so they've used 2 quarterbacks this year at Georgia Tech, Jordan Yates and Jeff Sims. And they brought in Sims in the second quarter against North Carolina. He threw for 1 touchdown and ran for 3. And of the 2 quarterbacks, and they might use both, I'm guessing Sims will start on Saturday. They might use both quarterbacks. Of the 2, Sims runs more of the RPOs, is what I've seen, gathered, been told. Now, obviously, that's a problem for Pitt. Now, can he run those RPOs as well as Caleb Ellaby at Western Michigan did? I don't know yet. But it seems like that's more of his game. That's, that's what he does a little bit more than Yates. And so if they go with Sims, that's going to be a problem. They're going to have to be prepared for that. They're going to have a good game plan for the RPOs, and they're going to have to be able to make good adjustments in the game. The thing is, Sims can run. He's a dynamic runner. And so you also can't let him get out and start running. You've got to defend the RPOs, read those well, but then you also have to keep an eye on the quarterback runs. And then you also have to, if you actually get pressure in the backfield, which has not been the case a lot, this season, if you do get pressure, you've got to keep him contained. You can't let him get out and break plays, keep plays alive, or just make plays on his own running. So there's a lot to handle with Jeff Sims. It's going to be a challenge. Homer Simpson says it's going to be a tough game. Georgia Tech is better than people give them credit for, and our defense is worse than people think. Games against Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, and Clemson could be everything. Yeah, those games are going to be everything. So is the game against Miami, Duke, Carolina, Virginia, and Syracuse. They're all the big pressure games. Is Pitt's defense worse than people think? I would actually disagree with you about that, Homer, because I don't think many people think, wow, yeah, Pitt's defense is pretty good. Look what they did against New Hampshire. I think people are looking at the Tennessee game and looking at the Western Michigan game and saying this defense has issues. If we're talking about Pitt fans, I think Pitt fans are looking at the Western Michigan game and the Tennessee game and saying this defense has issues, has some big problems that they're going to have to find out a way to address and take care of. I'm of the mind that they're not as bad as they were in those 2 games. My thing on those 2 games, what I've said, I think I've said it on the podcast. I think I've said it on the Panthers Insider Show on 93.7 The Fan, and probably written it on Panther-Lair.com. What I've said is, those 2 games, you look at Tennessee and Western Michigan, there were sort of 2 key issues in each game. The issue in the Tennessee game, I think, were bad fundamentals. Guys not doing their jobs, guys not sticking to their responsibilities, guys not doing what they were supposed to do, trying to do somebody else's job, trying to pick up for somebody else. And that's a problem. That causes a problem in most defensive schemes, and certainly in this one. In the Western Michigan game, I think the issue was schematic. I think they didn't have a good plan. I think they had a bad game plan for defending those RPOs, and they didn't make good adjustments to them in the game. Now, the thing about both of those issues, the fundamentals against Tennessee and the game plan issues against Western Michigan, the thing about both of those issues is that they're correctable. I don't think the issues in either one of those games was tied to talent. I don't think it was tied to ability. I don't think it was tied to size or speed. I think Pitt's defense has those things. There's question marks about the defensive line, and I'll give you that. There's question marks about the defensive line and how talented they are. But in terms of where Pitt was really getting beat, it wasn't a matter of talent. I think they're good enough. They just need to be cleaner in their fundamentals than they were against Tennessee, and they need to have a better game plan and adjustments than they had against Western Michigan. So that makes me think that this defense doesn't have to be as bad as they were in those two games for the rest of the way, and that they can improve, they can get better, and they can play better and play stronger and be the reason that Pitt wins a few games at some point over the next 8. So, yeah, but I do agree. Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, Clemson, huge games. Huge games. Miami after that, and every game. They're all going to be crucial. Dan Juby says, hey, Chris, any idea on what the starting offensive line will look like Saturday? Is Owen Drexel back? I don't know. And, they're not going to tell us anything until the time comes. If Owen Drexel was hurt enough to not even be in uniform on Saturday, I had to guess, and it's just completely a guess, I would guess that he doesn't play this week. I thought the offensive line that they rolled out there against New Hampshire, left to right, with Carter Warren, Marcus Minor, Jake Cradle, Gabe Hoy, and Matt Gonsalves, I thought it was a pretty solid group. I thought they played well. I thought the right side gave up some pressure. I thought they ran well through the left side. I like that group. And that's not a knock on Owen Drexel, but I think it was a good group to have out there. And if they have to go with them again, the key is, all right, the key is if you're going to go against a team with an unbalanced defensive, with an odd man front on defense, if Georgia Tech's going to go out there, if they're going to play a 3-3-5 look, your center has to be on point. He's got to know what he's seeing. He's got to be able to make the calls. He's got to have a sense of what's going on, because that can really hurt you if your center is lost out there. And so, I don't know if Owen Drexel is a better option than Jake Cradle in that regard. I don't know which one of those guys could do better for you in the recognition and the preparation and all of that. I know Owen Drexel learned a lot from Jimmy Morrissey about how to prepare. If he's not available, you would have to think and you would hope that he's sitting there with Jake Cradle going over these things and making sure he knows what he's seeing out there. That's going to be crucial in this game. Brock Madonic says, going out on a limb, any chance Pitt could still reach a New Year's Six bowl? Brock, man, let's see what happens this week in Atlanta. I can't even go down that road. Didn't we spend enough time talking about whether game day was going to come to Pitt for the Clemson game? Let's not even talk about New Year's Six bowls, all right? RJCman38 says, there's zero confidence by Pitt fans till we see what Pitt does over the next 4 weeks or 3 games. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't know where the Pitt fan confidence is, but you know what? Pitt's going to be on the road for 2 games over the next 3 weeks. And when they come home to face Clemson on the 23rd, I think we'll all have some strong opinions about what this team is and where they are. If they come home to face Clemson on the 23rd and they're 5-1, they beat Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech on the road, I think we're probably going to feel pretty good about their chances or about who they are as a team. I would think. Scroll down. Pittsburgh Sports All the Time says, besides the defense, what do you think the key to victory is on Saturday? Mine is the run game. Yeah, if you're going to say besides the defense, then I'm going to pick the offense. But I think, this year's team, unless the defense makes a major turnaround, this team is going to be predicated on offense. They're going to win games with offense. I think that's what's going to be the key. So they're going to have to find a way to run the ball better than they have against the Power 5 teams so far. I think they're going to have to, and Kenny Pickett's going to have to keep playing at a really high level. And not just Kenny Pickett, but Jordan Addison too. I looked up this stat on Pro Football Focus. If you look at all wide receivers in the country, or all players in the country with at least 30 passing targets this season so far, Jordan Addison has the highest passer rating of any receiver in the country who's seen at least 30 targets. That's how he's just playing. Now, it helps when you're scoring 8 touchdowns. Touchdowns weigh in pretty heavily in the passer rating. But he is just playing on another level right now. Jordan Addison is really, really good. Lucas Krull didn't score any touchdowns on Saturday, but he's been good for a touchdown every week prior to that. You saw Gavin Bartholomew come alive, and then you also saw Shockey Jacques-Louis get involved. And you saw Taysier Mack catch a touchdown pass, and you've seen Jalen Barden be involved out there, Melquise Stovall. They got weapons on this team. And they got to figure out the running back situation, and I'm intrigued to see what Rodney Hammond can continue doing, because he was pretty good on Saturday against an FCS team, but he was pretty good. And Izzy Abanikanda too. And Vincent Davis just had 247 yards rushing the last time Pitt played at Georgia Tech. There are skill players on this team who can make plays. They're just going to have to keep doing it. Week after week, you cannot have a fall off, because right now the team is relying on you to score points to win the games. Mad Dog XNE DND says, do you think Jordan Addison is a first-round prospect? That's tough. I don't know. I don't know if he has the size to be a first-round prospect right now. And I know Devontae Smith is not a big receiver. I know that you've seen some guys who are not huge going in the first rounds. I don't know if Jordan Addison is going to have that kind of profile when he plays at Pitt as opposed to Alabama. You know what I mean? Or LSU or something like that. So I think he can go to the combine and test really well. He can have a great pro day and all those things. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a second-round guy, though, or a third-round guy. Where did Tyler Boyd end up? Second or third round, something like that. I wouldn't be surprised to see Addison end up in that range. But he's playing at a really high level right now. Let's see here. Scroll through a few more topics. Doug Wood says, with Rodney Hammond having a good day, do you think we'll see less carries for Vincent Davis? I'd prefer to see a split between Izzy Abanikanda and Rodney Hammond. I've been touting Izzy Abanikanda for the last 9 months. I've been riding that one for a long time. I'm not going to totally back off of that yet, but Rodney Hammond has shown me enough interesting things that I want to see what he can do a little bit more. I'm intrigued by his potential. I still think Abanikanda has the highest ceiling on the team. I think he's potential to be the best overall back on the team, but Hammond is pretty intriguing. Like I said, Vincent Davis just had a huge game at Georgia Tech last year. So I think there's potential in there. I think there are guys in there. I think those 3 guys have I think those 3 guys can be good backs with varying degrees of effectiveness. I would certainly have my priority ranking of how I would order them. The coaches, I think, have theirs. I think if they block well, I think guys like Hammond and Abanikanda and even Davis can make plays and rack up yards and score some points. Got to see if the blocking comes together, but I like the talent of the backs. Royce Beacom says, USA Today ranks Pickett as the number 5 quarterback. Do you think he can go any further with 3 SEC quarterbacks ranked ahead of him, given the media preference for the SEC? Latch him onto a winning team, ... I think, I kind of said that Kenny Pickett, I think I said this last week, he needs to have that signature game. He needs to have that big game like Nate Peterman had against Clemson. He needs to have that signature game. He had that Miami game, and he had the UCF game, I guess, 2 years ago. But the Clemson game is when he can really, I think, establish himself on the national radar. If he keeps up what he's doing, and I don't know if he's going to have 15 passes every 4 games the rest of the season, or 15 touchdown passes every 4 games the rest of the season. He'd end up with, what, 45 touchdowns? I don't think he's going to do that. But if he has good games at Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech, and Pitt wins those games and goes into Clemson at 5-1, and Pickett is still playing well, and he's only got maybe 2 or 3 interceptions, and he's got 20-some touchdowns, which seems very realistic and possible, and then he has a big game against Clemson, then he's going to have a lot of eyes on him for the final 5 games of the season. I think that's what he needs to do. He needs to keep himself high in those rankings, and then play big in the biggest game on the schedule. And that'll get you national notoriety. Talk is Pitt points out we sacked Sims last year 6 times. I'll take your word on that. It sounds familiar, and they'll need to do something like that again. Anthony Tennyson says our defensive ends are not as good at reading and holding their guys up at the line against the RPOs like the 2 All-Americans we had last year. Yeah, and some of that might be, experience. Jones and Weaver were 5th-year seniors, the experienced guys. This year's defensive line has 1 5th-year senior, Deslin Alexandra. They need Baldonado to play well. He's been good. I think he's been their best defensive line. Well, one of their 2 best defensive linemen, along with Kalijah Cansey. Baldonado has been, but they need John Morgan to play better. They need Alexandra to step up, and they need Deion Hayes to play better too. They need all those guys. They need them to play really well, and then the tackles. I mean, Camp and Cansey need to have big games every week. I think for this defense to really excel. Let's see. Byron Flex says, look, Tennessee had only 70 scholarship players. Lost to Western Michigan, we lose to Georgia Tech. Agree? No, I don't really agree that there's anything. I don't agree that it's some foregone conclusion that Pitt's going to lose to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech lost to Northern Illinois. All right? So, I mean, if you want to bring up that Pitt lost to Western Michigan, good. Go for it. If you want to say that's the reason they're going to lose to Georgia Tech, that's dumb. No disrespect. But Georgia Tech has a non-Power 5 loss this year too. So, not really sure we can use one. I'm not sure we can hold that against one team and not hold it against the other, right? All right. I think we'll leave it on that. It's going to be interesting. I mean, nothing else. If nothing else, it's going to be interesting to see what happens on Saturday in Atlanta. Like I said, we'll be live after the game. Probably within a half hour or so after the end of the game. I'll tweet it out, and you can definitely get notifications if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's the way to find out that we are going live to talk about Pitt, Georgia Tech after the game ends. Win or lose, we'll have plenty to talk about, I am sure. I don't know which outcome would generate more conversation, the winning or the losing, but there's going to be a lot. I think either way, we'll have plenty to talk about. Get your day started on Saturday with the Panthers Insider Show on 93.7 The Fan. It's me talking for an hour about Pitt sports. It's always fun. If you're bored between now and then, check out the Kenny Pickett Show. That's on our YouTube channel. It's on Panther-Lair.com. It's in your podcast feed. We've got it there as well. And then go to the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, recruiting, you find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends. Panther-Lair.com. Going to be lively on Friday or on Saturday. No question about that as people talk about the game while it happens. These road games, seems like the message boards are always extra active. So make sure you tune in. Thanks to everybody who joined the live stream here on a Wednesday night. It's always fun to have those conversations. Thanks to you to listen to the podcast through the week. And we'll talk to you on Saturday after the Georgia Tech game. Have a good rest of the week. We'll see you on Saturday.